Hey, Nick from the Headliner team here with another exciting installment of the Headliner podcast. On this week's episode, we'll be hearing from a few of our newsletter subscribers about 3 ways that they like to promote episodes of their podcast. So without further ado, let's get things started with a few words from Oliver before we go directly into hearing from you guys on our newsletter.
I hope you're doing well. I imagine there's a good chance that, like me, you are spending a lot of time indoors right now, starting to wonder, when will things get back to normal? They will one day, but for now, let's just all embrace the uncertainty. One thing is for certain, though, there's some new updates from Headliner. We've released a bunch of new templates in the Automation Wizard. These aren't audiograms, these are actually full-on animated videos. Audiograms have been out for a few years now, and we thought it was time to start elevating things a little bit, making things a little more advanced available to podcasters. So get into the podcast audio video wizard and give it a whirl. I also want to mention that if you go to podcastgrader.headliner.app, you can plug in your RSS feed and figure out how discoverable your podcast is. We set this up to kind of help people see areas they might want to improve upon for their podcast discoverability. That's podcastgrader.headliner.app. In terms of a tip for this week, I would say just use video on social media. See how it does. In tests we've done, video outperformed static images by 5 times. Obviously, Headliner makes it super easy to get videos out there without having to go on camera. But if you do want to go on camera, you can just pick up your phone, start recording, share stuff with your followers, and see what happens. Really, not much to lose. Just try it out. Thanks for listening. And if you have any ideas for the podcast or for Headliner, you can always reach me, oliver@headliner.app. That's oliver@headliner.app. Thank you.
My name is Ira Wolf, and my podcast is Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization. I wanted to share a couple ways that I promote the podcast, Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization. First of all, I use Libsyn, so it goes out from there. We then repost it on our website, which is geeksgeezersgoogleization.com. I also create a blog article, which I post in several different places, but on my corporate site, which is successperformancesolutions.com. We post it regularly on email or on social media, which goes out to primarily we're B2B, so I use LinkedIn and Twitter, Facebook, and I'm starting to, based on what I just learned about the Headliner, I'm going to start using it on Instagram. I do have an account, but I didn't use it regularly, but I am certainly going to use it now. We also provide links to our clients or to our guests. I also, one of the big ways that I was able to get a lot of people interested is I do a fair amount of speaking, not so much these days, but a fair amount of speaking. And I created postcards, and I hand them out at every conference. So there's been a couple thousand distributed at the conferences at which I speak at. So I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm really liking what I see in Headliner, and I plan to use it a lot more in the near future.
My name's Jürgen Strauss. My podcast is called InnovaBuzz. We're approaching episode 300. And the way I like to promote it, the top 3 ways. First of all, we put it in our newsletter. We post it on social media. We certainly do a Headliner audiogram and use that very widely. And then we produce a whole range of clips, quotes from the guest in the podcast conversation, and we convert those into various forms of media that we share on social media, as well as in blog posts and as audiograms as well. So I would love to be on your podcast, on the Headliner podcast, and talk about all things podcasting and promoting podcasts and marketing. We're putting together a whole customer journey around marketing your podcast, launching a podcast, being a guest on podcasts as well. So I'd love to have the opportunity to share some of that information with your audience who are probably all podcasters.
Hello, my name is Austin Gates, and my podcast is called More Than Just a Movie. Here are 3 ways I like to promote my podcast. Number 1. After I've uploaded my podcast to Liberated Syndication properly, I will make sure they are placed in order on the timeline on Twitter and Facebook. Number 2, I will share the podcast onto social media websites that will allow it from Spotify and SoundCloud, for those are very popular places for your podcast to stream from. Number 3, I will post onto and then share from YouTube. Thank you very much, and let's pretend we're going to see each other tomorrow.
My name is Mark Leslie Lefebvre, and my podcast is Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing. Here are the top 3 ways I like to promote my podcast. Number 1, I use Headliner's convenient and easy-to-use online resources to create a short soundbite clip that features something provocative and intriguing that my guest says, usually 30 seconds. I share that via Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, being sure to tag my guest for reshares. I also share topics and episodes that I think are pertinent to the right audience via LinkedIn, making sure to always use appropriate keyword hashtags. Number 2, I've embedded the show notes and the podcast feed directly within my main author website, markleslie.ca. This means that it's not only visible via the regular RSS feed from Libsyn, via the WordPress site starkreflections.ca, but it's also there via my own website. Just increases the chances of discoverability from people who are checking me out. And number 3, I love to use Zoom to record my podcast so the guest and I can see one another while we're chatting. That alone is convenient and helpful, but with their permission, I will later upload the interview segment only to my YouTube channel. Now, I've also started uploading an audio-only full episode version to a separate YouTube feed to ensure that there are more ways that people can discover and enjoy it. This is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great podcasting and good Stark Reflections.
This is Miles Biggs here, the host of Relish the Journey, and this is my audio clip as a sort of application to be on the podcast. So the top 3 things, the 3 ways you said in your email here about how I like to promote my podcast, I would say the top thing that I like to do is, swap casting and cross promotion and interviewing other folks on my show, then being on their show and exposing each other to each of our audiences. I find that to be awesome to get new people, but also gratifying to network with like-minded individuals who are also in the podcasting space or entrepreneurial space. The second is speaking. I've been fortunate enough to give a few talks past couple of years at the International Builders Show in Las Vegas about how to start a podcast. And that's a great way to get the word out and meet people and network, but also drop hints about the show. I also have a TED Talk after this whole COVID-19 ties down. I've got a TED Talk that's going to be rescheduled for sometime in 2020 locally, TEDx event that I'll be promoting the podcast there. And then third is going to be the book I wrote. I wrote a book based on themes from my podcast that's going to be a great promotion tool and an added revenue stream. So when that comes out, that's going to probably jump to number 1, one of my favorite ways to promote the show. So those are my 3. I've been using Headliner off and on for a while now. I think it's a great tool. I'm really excited to see your guys' integrations with Libsyn and all these new services and products you guys are rolling out. It's really impressive. So congrats to you and the team, and I look forward to hearing back from you. Again, this is Miles from Relish the Journey.
Hi, my name is Sarah Tisdale, and my podcast is called Secret Gardening with Sarah. The top 3 ways I like to promote my podcast are 1, Insta stories on Instagram, 2, sharing a link in my monthly newsletter, and 3, using Headliner videos on all my social media platforms to give everybody a little sneak peek.
My name is George Wu, and my podcast is Navigating the Rise. Here are the top 3 ways I like to promote my podcast. 1 is through email, 2nd is through social media, and 3rd is through podcasting on other guests' show.
Hey, my name is Sam Pasco. My podcast is Pasco Sports. Here are my top 3 ways I like to promote my podcast. First, I like to make graphics. Photoshop is great, but if you're cheap and lazy like me, Canva.com is a great free online tool that is super easy to work with. I post all my graphics on Twitter and Instagram, and they really catch people's attention. The second way I promote my podcast is through joining other platforms. If you don't have a Twitter account or Instagram account, you're missing out. For example, I've been hesitant to join Instagram since I've always considered it an extra hassle when creating posts or promoting content, but now I'm on both platforms and thriving. You can actually find me at Pasco Sports on Twitter and at Pasco Sports IG on Instagram. Hit us with a follow. Before I say the final tip, please head over to Spotify and search Pasco Sports and just listen to 30 seconds of our latest episode. If you don't like it, you can switch it off, but just 30 seconds is a big help for us. Thanks. The final way I like to promote my podcast is through tagging people on all the Instagram and Twitter and social media posts I do. I always find tagging my friends and industry experts gives my posts a little bit more of an opportunity to grow and find a following to people that really matter. Also include hashtags in this as well, as you never know when a post could go viral. All right, that's all I got, and be sure to check out Pasco Sports on Twitter, Instagram, and Spotify. Thanks.
So the number one thing that we heard from our newsletter subscribers is that they love using our site and app to create audiograms out of their podcast. And this makes a lot of sense because social media apps like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and LinkedIn don't natively support audio. But with Headliner, you can easily take audio from your show and repackage it into a neat, well-designed video that'll be able to grab people's attention and potentially convert them into listeners. Another great podcast marketing tip we heard was creating and maintaining blog posts that link into your show. The basic logic behind that is, much like using audiograms to convert video watchers into listeners, you're bridging a gap found across different content mediums by adapting your media into a different format. The idea here is that by reading a blog post that you've written, people will become a fan of your content itself and will be more likely to listen to the audio you're putting out. There was definitely a lot of interesting and great points made in each of our submissions this week, and I think that by finding a way to incorporate at least a few of these ideas, you'll be able to get your show out to a wider audience in no time. Anyway, guys, that brings us to the end of this week's Headliner podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and that you got some value out of our episode today. If you want to help with the podcast and submit some questions for us to tackle in future episodes, or just submit some answers to our questions, you can do that by signing up for our newsletter at headliner.app/newsletter. Till next time.